Ridley Pearson. Wow, it's been forever. How are you?
Has you look wonderful. I'm doing great, thanks.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear that. I am sort of in my library. Um,
That's a nice library.
Thank you. I really like these virtual backgrounds because I don't have time to clean up my office, which is I do have one like this that has a dog on the couch and it drives everyone crazy because they keep waiting for the dog. But I changed it. So
That's
it's been so long since we've talked, Ridley. Catch me up on all the good things you've been doing with children and with Disney and the projects that you were in. Gosh,
yeah. I'm still in the mall. Let's see where we are. Disney has had a Kingdom Keepers book of mine for over 3 years, um, and it's actually going on 4 years. And I think what happened was it's a new Kingdom Keepers series called Kingdom Keepers Inheritance, which is the sons and daughters of the Kingdom Keepers. And there have been like two big waves where we thought Disney Plus was going to stream it and stream the original series. And so Disney held back the book, hoping to time it with the launch of the streaming. And now I don't think the streaming is going to happen at all. So I think the gamble sort of backfired because we've waited 4 years to publish this book, but it will be published, I think, in the fall of 21.
okay.
So I really have in the young readers world, I have 5 books in the next 2 years. I have a collection of not horror, but suspense books with Disney called Cautionary Tales. And then I have this new Kingdom Keepers book. And then I've written a new original IP property for DC Entertainment called The Indestructibles that as graphic novels that start this August.
That sounds like fun. When you say a graphic novel, you write the text and someone else draws the pictures.
Yeah, but I did a series called Super Sons for them, the son of Superman and Batman together, and it's a steep learning curve because um, you are the director of the film and the writer of the film, in that all of your words inform the illustrator what needs to be seen in each of the 700 panels. So you might write a page and a half or something in the book that's this big, but it tells you the mood of the people, where they are in the frame, what they're wearing, what the weather is, all of that, kind of like a director would. And the interesting challenge, I think, for novelists doing this is it's a flip of the convention, in that in a novel, we will spend pages describing things and adding dialogue. And in a graphic novel, you really want the image to do 90% of the work. And then you only have room for maybe 8 words, 10 words. So you have to learn to do all the storytelling through the graphic part of the novel. And then the words help move the story along or inform you of the character of the person. But it's really it's when they asked me to do it, I said, I know nothing about Superman and Batman, and I've never written a graphic novel. And they said, oh, you're perfect. So it's just a different world.
Well, it really is. That how different is that than writing a script? Because again, when you're doing, using a film as a platform, the images tell enormous amount. I mean, I've worked with authors who are used to writing scripts, and when they write books, they often don't write enough because they're so used to the image filling in, and they
Yes.
don't. And that's a real problem. But have you actually written scripts? Was this dramatically different than that?
I have written many, many scripts, and it is in fact written in script form.
Okay.
So you write it just like not just like, but quite close to a film script. Um, but it's when I work with middle school kids, I show them the scripts, and they're really something, because you might have half a page of description, and then these 2 little lines, and then a quarter page of description and no lines, and a quarter page of description and no lines, and a quarter page of description. It's it took me reading a novel, a graphic novel called Amulet, and another one called Nimona, to understand that these books are told graphically. And I called my editor and said, wait, these are graphic novels. And she went, yeah, but
Oh,
it just took me a while to figure out how those stories are told.
well, I can well imagine that. Now, it seems to me then that this is well, it's obviously a collaboration, but it's
You
a
know,
different kind of collaboration than writing a novel with somebody. We did an event with Preston and Child last week, and it always comes up, how did they write together? And we had a talk with Jim Patterson in December about writing with so many co-authors. And of course, I'm used to Clive and various co-authors that he
yeah.
has. But what happens if the illustrator doesn't realize your description, or in fact even disagrees with you? That's a different issue
Yeah,
than
well,
writing.
it is. I mean, it is super collaborative. I spent a decade writing with Dave Barry, and those were all books and novels. And we had a certain way we did that. And I didn't know what this kind of a collaboration would be. Thankfully, in both, I'm very lucky in that both my 3-book projects, so these 6 books, I had wonderful and have wonderful illustrators. And my having grown up the son of an illustrator, my mom was an illustrator, I put much more faith in their ability than my own. So if I describe something and it has to come back through channels. So I do all this to a pair of editors at DC, and they work with the illustrator and she works with them. And it's a little bit convoluted that way. But if either Ilya or Barat felt like the description wasn't up to where they could visualize what I wanted, I certainly heard about it. And they have such a good sense of image that I'll give you an example. In a very early Super Sons book, I had described that one of our lead characters was going to walk up to the door of a fortune teller, and we were going to see her from the back standing at the fortune teller's door before she went in. Well, that they do these things in very fast sketches, so they don't waste their time doing a big, perfect colorized version. And I got this back, and I realized what an idiot I was, because we want to see the face of the character the first time we see this person. We don't want to see her back. And the illustrator was already on that, saying, shouldn't we be inside the shop looking through the window and seeing the face? And I went, well, of course we should. So there's that kind of give and take where they just understand imagery better, much better than I.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really been fun. It's really been good.
So when Red Riding Hood comes up and knocks on grandmother's door, you should be looking out at Red Riding Hood and not inside at the wolf in the bed
Yeah, there you go.
for the first thing. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
really
like
fun.
that. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned your books with Dave Barry, because honestly, Ridley, this is year 31 of the Poison Pen, and I've looked back at some true highlights, and I'm never ever going to forget when you and Dave Barry and I took your first, I think it was your first children's book, to a private school here.
Yes.
And we did the program, and the kids had come to it, and we hadn't really thought a lot about purchasing books. It had been, it was a first passage doing this, but I've always remembered these kids screaming out, to find their mothers waiting in cars, and then throwing money at us. Literally money, $20 bills were raining down upon us, and we were firing books out to people. And
That was,
it all worked out, but I've always remembered that, how you got
yeah.
these kids.
No, it's a
got
different
this-
world.
Yeah,
Dave and I, that would have been Peter and the Starcatchers.
yes,
And
it was.
that book went on to, I think it's now sold over 600,000 copies in hardcover. And it's, was developed for Broadway, and it was nominated for 9 Tonys, and it won 5. And it's been touring really the world since. It was the 3rd most produced play in America for the last 4 years. It continues to have like 700 productions a year. Of course, with COVID, that's gone almost to 0, but it's really been so fun to see the success of those books.
Well, yeah, it was on a mini scale, hugely successful here, but I don't know that we could have envisioned the Broadway play and the other things.
No,
How
no.
many more Peter and the Stargazers did you and Dave write together?
We wrote 5 Peter and the Starcatchers, and we wrote an illustrated Peter Pan book for Disney. and then 3 small Peter and the Starcatchers books for sort of grades 2 through 4. All told, in the 10 years, we wrote 12 books together.
Excellent. Do you miss working with Dave?
Yeah, I do. He was and is, you know, he remains a very close friend, but I certainly do. You know, for those familiar with Dave's writing, you can imagine spending most of every day, even by email, with a guy like that, day in and day out for a decade. You're obviously going to miss it. I had to get, you know, massages on my cheeks after working with Dave, because you're laughing at everything. And he's a brilliant writer. He's a slow writer. Um, he's a very thoughtful guy, and I mean, I learned a ton from him because he comes from the school of journalism. And that means that when you're finally ready to turn it in, it's perfect. And I came from the crime world, where I would, and still do, write outlines and outlines and outlines, and then write multiple drafts. I might write 4,000, 5,000 pages to get a 300-page book published. And Dave locked his chapters. When they were done, they were done. So, I mean, you know, I learned a lot about working slower but faster, if you will, slower but fewer drafts. He's really good with words. He's got a great imagination, and he's super funny. I mean, he can take the worst event, like if you had I had a really bad lunch with him one time. The waiter was the most obnoxious person on earth. And there was nothing funny about this. We both hated it so much that we wrote a note to the manager saying, this guy should never work for you again. And then Dave wrote one of his columns about it, and I was falling out of my chair laughing. And then I thought, wait a second, I was there and there was nothing funny. But he can find funny in anything, you know.
Yes, he's wonderful. We did a number of events with Dave on his own.
Yeah,
And
sure.
his first standalone thriller, I still remember it. He came to the store and we did, I'm sure we still have it as a podcast because we've been into our archives. We've got, 25 years worth of video and audio recordings that we're now working our way through so we can post them. Rob has been my husband has taken over podcasts, and he's got almost 61,000 downloads so far for
Oh
the
my God.
podcasts that we've done. And I know Dave is lurking there, but in any case, I always remember the thesis of that book, which truly was almost, he was almost a prognosticator, because if you recall, it was about a guy in Florida, a homeless guy, lived in a tree, and he picked up his small change by accepting money to vote. And I thought, that book in a way has sort of, certainly echoed in
The end of
our
that book was
last
a
election.
nuclear bomb in a briefcase.
Yeah.
They actually, when Big Trouble came out, 9/11 happened on the week it was supposed to be published. So they had to move the publication date like 2 months to get away from all of that, because it was just too close to reality. Yeah,
Right. When he made it up, Ridley, we all thought it was just,
I know.
fabulous and funny. And who knew that it was actually going to come true, which is a conversation I've had with so many authors recently about, you couldn't actually make up the
Yeah.
things that have happened recently. But since we're talking about
I
thrillers,
mean,
let's talk to you about
as
the
an example of that, Barbara, the overarching concept of the 3-book Super Son graphic novel series was that a company had developed a virus that would be very threatening to the world. And thank goodness we got the last book out before COVID hit, because it was way too close to the whole COVID thing. And it has a happy ending. It didn't have a bad ending, but it was way too close to reality. And it happens with me all the time. As you know, it's happened in my thrillers, I think 6 or 7 times, where the subject matter I've seen in a newspaper buried back at page 18 and I decided to write about ends up on page 1 by the time the book comes out.
It's really intriguing how fiction can lead reality. And I used to think that fiction often was more real than reality. But
I don't know about that.
just recently, it's been slightly different. So speaking of thrillers, are you actually working on one? I know you've been, in the young adult world here for quite a long time, but I miss
Sure.
your thrillers.
Sure. No, I've got a bunch of projects. One, we've been developing my Bolt series, which is 9 books, with a really good producer and a fabulous award-winning scriptwriter, as a streaming series. And we don't have any news on that, but it's what she's done with the series is just amazing. And so I've actually gone out and started to look at the idea of publishing some new Bolt books again, whom
Oh,
I love. I just loved that character. But in the meantime, I've had a story. Unfortunately, it is a little related to present time, but I've been working on it so long, I'm not going to change. But I've been basically outlining a book in sort of spare time, if I have it, for about 3 years, and I'm coming very close now to sending that off to some publishers. So
I'm so pleased to hear that.
I'm really excited.
You had such a tremendous thriller following here at the Poison Pen, and also at I'm trying to remember another bookstore here in the valley where you were like a superhero, and they used to greet you with
I had a nice
balloons.
salesman at that one. That's what I remember. That was C.J. Snow, and C.J. Snow would go out onto the street, I think, and grab people and say, "You need to read this book now, and you have to pay me money for it." He sold so many copies of my books, just sort of word of mouth. Yeah, I'm thrilled to get back in the thriller world. I've just, the when in the children's and the younger reader world, you often need to publish on a more frequent basis, and because they age out so quickly. And so I've really been consumed with that for, I don't know, since Dave and I started in the early aughts, so almost 20 years. And I've published a few thrillers in there, but I'm really eager to get back both to sort of procedurals and international. So we'll see what happens.
I am so pleased to hear that. And the Bolt books were basically Seattle as a
We
land.
were, yeah, yeah.
And I still remember you working out the tides in one case, to make
Exactly.
something happen. And,
Undercurrent.
you and I used to have a lot of conversations about
Yeah.
that. But you also wrote, is it three set in Sun Valley with law
Yes,
enforcement
I
there?
did.
And I really enjoyed those. You've moved back to Idaho, haven't you?
Yeah, we've been here now. We're going on 4 years again. I mean, I've been here for 40 years, but we're now full time here 4 years.
Ah, well, I know I got to visit you once, and the other day I said to Rob, because I think flying is not so appealing. I mean, I spent my life on airplanes. I have flown God knows how many hundreds of thousands of
I
miles,
did.
international flights, national flights, whatever. But right at the moment, flying does not really appeal to me. So we had a wonderful car trip through Wyoming. We drove from here.
And you didn't stop by?
Well, we didn't get,
Next time
we
I
didn't
see you,
get
I'm
as,
gonna beat you up, Barbara.
I
We're gonna have a fight over that.
we
You were
didn't get as
5 hours away.
sorry, we didn't get as far as Idaho. We got as far Craig Johnson in, up in that part of Wyoming, and
Sure.
we went down south and we visited Lee and Andrew Child and Tasha, and we visited CJ Box, and we were in Jackson Hole. My husband had never been to Yellowstone. I could hardly believe it after, all the travel we'd done, and not to the Grand Tetons either. So that was the focus of that trip.
Yeah.
But I would really like to come up and see you in Sun Valley and, the area you live in, and go on into Montana. Although, I went to Glacier when I was like 12 years old. My parents, we did some really long driving trips from Chicago, and there were actual glaciers in Glacier. And
Yeah.
now, I remember Glacier Bay
Now
and,
the Rocky Mountains.
now Glacier Bay, Alaska is largely.
Well, Marcel and I did the same thing. We did a car trip, a van trip. This new thriller is set in northern Montana. And you know me, I didn't want to write it without going there. And in fact, the trip completely changed the way the book would be written. But we went through Yellowstone. We lived very close to it, but we hadn't traversed it for many years. And it was just so fun. It was in the winter. It was super cold and snowy and beautiful. And then we went up through central. We decided on this whole trip we would never take a highway. So then we went up through central Montana on 2-lane roads, through very tiny towns and vast landscapes that went on for hours with no fences, no ranches, no nothing. However, they were growing out there, but you didn't see anybody or anything. You could tell they were all, cultivated fields. And finally up to Havre is how they pronounce it. And spent a couple days up there for the book, but it was so beautiful. What a trip.
Well, Yellowstone is beautiful. Hilariously, we got there on the day it opened, which was, I think, May 15th, having come along. and the whole park shut down the next day in a blizzard.
Oh
I'm
yeah, well,
serious. I mean, they
that's common.
closed
Oh
down.
yeah, we
Yeah.
have snow here in July. I mean, we have had our 4th of July parade has had snow.
Wow.
So I'm very familiar with May blizzards.
Right. Well, I'm from Chicago and I can remember having snow in late April, but
Right,
I can't
right.
remember May. But I mean, that was when we had like real snow.
Yeah, no,
I've lived here in Arizona since 1986. So no, it's not a
there's snow
major.
there, Barbara. Yeah, it's the high altitude effect. I mean, it really doesn't matter what's going on here. We're a mile high and it'll be raining everywhere, but it snows here,
Right.
just
No,
'cause it's that much colder.
I certainly get it. We have in compensation, Ridley, traveled to the Arctic a lot. And we've been to Antarctica. And in fact, I should be right now in Antarctica from New Zealand in the other hemisphere. But of course, all that got canceled with COVID. And now, by the time they reboot it, I'm going to have to really rethink at my age whether I want to be 40 days at sea out of sight of land.
Right.
You have to look at it differently when the possibility of medical emergencies comes up,
Yeah.
and just age related, because you never know when something.
Marcel went to Antarctica with a friend 2 years ago and just came back glowing. She spent about a month and came back just saying it was the greatest trip of her life. She just adored it.
I loved
I
Antarctica,
stayed home
and
and wrote.
it's surprising how different it is than the Arctic. You tend to think, well, it's just the two poles. There's a lot of snow and ice and so forth, but wow, they are so different. Even the ice is remarkably different.
Barbara,
And
they're polar opposites.
Hmm?
They're polar opposites.
Very nice wordplay. I like that a lot. So, one of your projects in the time we've been together here, 31 years, was to live in China for a year. You and Marcella adopted a Chinese daughter, and you went to live in Shanghai, right?
Shanghai,
For
yeah.
how long were you there?
We're there a year. I taught at Fudan University there, and I did that really out of survival sake. That was the only way we could get a residency visa. And I liked it so much that then I came back and almost volunteered. Boise State had a situation where 2 of their professors in the creative writing department had to leave at the same time briefly, and they came back. But so I went in and sort of filled in for a year at Boise State, and then they offered me a kind of chair. And so now I have a 3-year position at Boise State, and I'm teaching there. I sort of fell in. I got the bite of teaching. I got the bug.
I can easily see you teaching because you're very careful, you're research oriented, you like explaining things to people. One of the things I always loved about your thrillers, is I learned so much. People often ask, why do you read crime fiction more than anything else? Although I have to admit, I'm really a classic romance reader, and also I love biography and history.
I love it.
I've dragged Rob into watching Bridgerton a couple of episodes, not because I think the storytelling is necessarily that great, but I'm a sucker for the Regency, and the clothes and the backgrounds for Bridgerton are,
Incredible.
man, they must have had just an incredible budget.
The production value of that show sold it. I really think it did. And it was a romp. It was really fun. I really look forward to another season, but the production value was over the top.
Totally.
My
Better,
gosh.
in fact, than almost every Jane Austen adaptation.
Yes. Oh, exactly. Just
Yeah, one of the things, if you're a serious Regency reader, is that Gunders was the ice cream parlor, where society, it was like, I'm trying to think, there used to be an ice cream parlor in New York on South Central Park. My age is showing up here and I can't remember. It was in the hotel and it was all pink. Anyway, it was and it was like a rite of passage for young girls in New York to go with their mothers and, either have tea at the plaza or, show up and have ice cream and so forth at this wonderful place. And Gunders was that thing in Regency London, but you hardly ever see that. And yet there's a scene when the Duke rejects the daughter in, Joy or whatever her name is in Bridgerton. Yeah. And they're standing outside of Gunder's ice cream parlor where they were going to meet. And I thought, they have really got granular detail.
They did it right. Yeah.
I mean,
research.
Right. Yeah. Really impressed with the whole thing. Anyway, back to my point. I have always read crime fiction more than anything else because you get to learn so many great things, many of which it's just like a rag bag, you know, it's not like there's concentrated learning necessarily, but you get to learn so many cool things reading crime fiction because the authors who write it work so hard,
You
you know,
really do.
on their research and to get their, you know, their procedural stuff right. If they're writing legal or police thrillers, making up stuff, you know, if you're writing PI, but if some of them are amazingly real. And we've talked a lot with authors recently about the fact that once upon a time, you could write like a private eye series like Ross McDonald wrote Blue Archer or John D. McDonald wrote Travis McGee. And the characters didn't change book to book. It was as though, you know, the books, the events in the previous book, there was like a complete reset
Right.
and they weren't affected by it. But it's very difficult to do that now when you have these character driven stories where
Right.
people really do characters react to things that happen to them. It
Yeah.
comes up because people ask so often, you know, do I need to read this series at the beginning? And even though the stories in each book are complete, there are often things that if you don't read it from the beginning would be complete spoilers if you start at book 5 and then you go back to book 1 because some of the conflict and tension in the relationships has been resolved by the time you move on to another book, and you would never, you know, have that you know, who is he trustworthy or she or what's going
Right.
on thing if you don't start at the beginning. But with a lot of books falling out of print or falling into more difficult print on demand situations, it's getting harder in a long series to get people back to the first book. So, you know, if you're going to reboot Bolt, I hope that you either start over again or you can somehow bring the first 9 books back into play.
Right, as do I. You know, it's a tricky thing. I don't know that I'll do it, but I loved writing those characters. And should we get a TV show, it sort of makes sense to put some more Bolt books out there. I've got a drawer full of probably 15 Bolt plots that, you know, never got off the ground. But it is interesting with series. I think also streaming has now, you know, to your point about series books, streaming has influenced readers because as viewers they're used to now a story taking 6 or 8 pieces to finish and the characters developing over this big span of time. And if you write a series of standalone, it probably doesn't serve the way it does as if you write a series that continues. um, you know, John D. McDonald being a series of standalones, although there were always things that carried on. But what I've tried to do, and I'm sure most do, is you try in the first 8 to 20 pages to inform the reader about the really crucial um, character changes that have come in the books prior. So you're sort of up to date by the time you're in the fourth, because all these books have to stand alone. And you just try to catch the reader up to where they feel comfortable with this character. If they want to go back, like you say, and start at book 1, then they go, oh, I get it. But hopefully won't go, oh, I already know what happens. You know, so we'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are also questions about aging characters in real time. You know, it's problems that Michael Connelly's had to face, Ian Rankin, a number of people. You know, Robert Parker and now Ace Atkins have largely suspended the real time for Spencer, and they keep updating it. I thought it was really fun because we did an event with Ace. We're the Spencer people, Ace and I. So we talked last Thursday about Spencer, and one of the things I really love in the new book that he's written and which we have right here, Someone to Watch Over Me, is that there is a new dog because Pearl the dog has been an important part of the Parker series. And now, you know, Pearl's a puppy because old Pearl has left us and
Yeah.
they are dealing now with a puppy German short hair pointer. And, you know, and if occasionally they refer to Spencer, somebody will refer to him as an old man. So, you know, Ace has kind of, you know, brought him along. So he's still credible as a stand-up guy. He can still hit the gym with, you know, with Hawk at Henry Simoli's gym and, you know, work the bag and not be a complete but he is moving slightly forward.
Yeah.
No,
That's so fun.
I think that's well done. I'm now going to prove that when you get old and you can't remember things, it's not that you have forgotten them, it's that your retrieval system is just so overloaded, it's spinning. The name of the ice cream rite of passage place in New York City,
You find
where
it?
mothers took their daughters, was Rumpelmeyer's. I
Oh,
remembered
Myers.
it.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it
Grew up
had
outside of New York.
like decor, and it had like little French, marble top cafe tables and the whole bit. But Rumpelmeyer's was a
Rumpelmeyer. No wonder you forgot that name. That's a tricky name.
well, this happens to me more and more, and I love it. I miss live events, and one of the reasons I miss them is when I have these moments where I can recall an entire story, but I can't remember the title, and I can't even remember the name of the character sometimes. But and now our customers are so used to it in a live audience me doing that they either shout it out or they look it up on their phone, and it becomes really interactive, in a way that it's
Uh,
interactive in a way the discussion would never have been if it weren't for the audience trying to rescue me. So,
yeah, I think a part of my mental decline is that the phone's right there and I can look it up before I can remember it. I'm trying to teach myself not to do that and actually
yes.
work to remember things.
Well, we could
Way too
draw
fast.
parallels to things that have happened in recent events and recognize that many people have stopped critical thinking and are just accepting whatever comes their way on their phones. So, yeah,
Right.
but let's not go there. We turned a
Right.
new page yesterday, and I'm going to be hopeful that it's all going to go in a good direction. It's been great to catch up with you.
Same here, Barbara.
I really hope that you'll come see us or offer us something we can actually sell or whatever you want to do.
One of the first flights I'm going to take is down to Poison Pen. It's
Well,
my
that'd be
favorite.
wonderful. And you know what? When we can go live again, we have a ridiculous event schedule.
Right.
And we're always happy to have authors come and just host other authors. It's not like you have to have a book.
I
You can
love
just
doing
show
that.
up.
Yeah, I really love doing that.
Which I think would be, great. You've always been a wonderful interviewer and, a careful reader. And we have in fact deployed many authors to host other authors. Michael Connolly's going to host an author for us Monday night. Brad Meltzer is going to host an author for us at 1 o'clock on Monday.
I'll say
Um,
hi to both of them for me.
I will.
I love
Jane
what
Atkins
Michael's
is
doing
going
these days.
to in February. I mean, we have all this opportunities for authors to get more screen time in. It's an enriching experience
Yeah, it's
for
lovely.
everyone. I'm sort of hoping that the Bosch fans won't hijack the event on
They
Monday
might.
night, because if you are on Instagram, and I do the Instagram posting for the store, there have been so many photos of wrapping up Bosch and the long-term cast members saying goodbye to each other. And well, you're familiar with that from Peter and the Stargazers.
Right.
It's hard when you've had a family
Yeah.
working together in some project, and then it comes to
Years
an
and
end.
years. Thankfully, the Peter and Starcatcher's family of theater still keep in close contact.
That's wonderful.
I'm in close contact with Rick Ellis, who wrote it, and occasionally others who were starring in it. And of course, Dave and I speak almost every day. So it's
Well,
a wonderful little family.
when you speak to him, give him our regards.
I
We'd
will. I will.
be
Yeah.
very happy to see him again. If you and Dave ever want to just do a conversation, because
Yeah.
these things that we're doing like today, we post them on our homepage. They're not formal events, they're just chats. And sometimes we did a symposium on Josephine Tay with 4 authors a week or 2 ago. So if you and Dave ever want to just, chat, our platform reaches thousands of people.
We'd love to do that.
Yeah, why don't you
really love
talk to them and see, because I'm always looking, to be honest, I'm always looking for material.
Good.
So
We'll
it
do
would
it.
be great to have it.
Right.
Ridley, say hi to Marcella for us,
Will
and
do.
stay in touch, will you?
Lovely to see you. Take care.
Okay. Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.